Begin this Wednesday as we do, those when we are lucky, with Christpher Hitchens, columnist for Vanity Fair. Mr. Hitchens, I often don't lead with news like this because it's very, very rare. What if you have a reaction to yet another massacre on American homeland?
Well, I think it's the definition of a non-story.
Why?
If you're not directly related to the people who are so unhappily concerned in it, it's of no interest. It's like and it fills me with doom and sadness and gloom that you, of all people, would go like a breaking news cable anchor person and just point the camera or the microphone at something that doesn't influence most people in the country, has no significance beyond itself.
Did Virginia Tech have any significance?
It's the death of journalism. It's even worse than Virginia Tech. No, it has no significance.
And if the shooter leaves a note like the Virginia Tech person left a video, does that have significance? Because I think you might be right. You might be right.
There's a prurient curiosity to it of a kind that I would say would come very near the bottom of the news and near the bottom of the front page, or in fact not on the front page at all.
I'm really curious by that.
Unless there was something of a political or other sort of ideological motive to it.
So it might have significance.
Well, it could have, but at the moment I'm sure it's just another case of an unhappy person hoping to do what Herostratus of antiquity did. Thank God, I always say to Herostratus on these occasions. You know who I'm talking about?
Yes.
Shall I tell the customers?
Please.
The man who burned down the Temple of Diana at Ephesus in antiquity, and when asked why he committed this appalling desecration, said because he wanted his name to be remembered forever. My so-called profession and yours is now apparently dedicated to making the wishes of every Herostratus in the world come true, when we should just be sighing that there are such people.
Now, yesterday,
moving on as quickly as possible.
Yesterday I had Tom Brokaw on, and we talked at length about NBC's decision to air the Virginia Tech tapes, which I condemned then, condemn now, and believe that in the famous phrase, that which succeeds is repeated, and that the more publicity the particular name gets or the videos get, the more we will encourage others to do that. Do you agree with that, Christopher Hitchens?
Sort of, I do, because there's so many places now where people who like that kind of thing can go. It's not as if one is repressing the news that such tapes and such individuals are, so to speak, available for our curiosity, because we are not going to put it on the front page. I live in Washington, D.C., as you know, all week and all last week in a newspaper that already has a lavishly sized sports section for people who care about games, which I don't. Every other page of the paper has been totally invaded by the death of one of the Redskins.
Sean Taylor.
Yeah, I'd never heard his name before. I never want to hear it again. It's no importance to me what happens to this guy.
To what do you attribute the significance?
It isn't socially important. It's not politically important. It may be important to sports fans, but they already have a consecrated section of the paper.
But obviously that would play into the Aruba kidnapping and disappearance of the young woman. And it would play into every one of these tragedies. So why the attention? Why the salacious coverage? I disagree with you, by the way.
I'll tell you why. Because it requires absolutely no news judgment at all. It's dead easy. You point the camera or you point the microphone at the scene, and the scenery does the rest. No need for any journalism. No need for any work. No digging. No investigation. Nothing. You just go up to victims or their relatives and say, how does it feel?
Now, let me add two facts why I disagree with you, especially about Nebraska. Omaha. The president was there this morning, and Friday of last week, a hand grenade was left at this mall. Does that change your assessment?
It might do.
All right.
That could so easily be a coincidence.
It could be a coincidence, but I'm just saying I'm going to stand by the news judgment here, but I do want to move on. I want to talk about Iran and religion with you.
Yes.
Iran first.
Yes.
I heard the argument earlier today that the reason Iran abandoned its nuclear program in 2003, the weaponization side, is because we invaded Iraq in 2002. Like Libya, they got the message. Do you agree or disagree, dispute, or concur with that assessment?
Well, it's my own opinion. We now know that the defector, the very, very high-level defector from the Iranian military, Brigadier General Ali Reza Asghari, left in 2003 after the liberation of Iraq and turned himself over to Western intelligence. It's probable that's our source, not certain for this. In other words, we knew they had a program. We can guess why they might have paused it. One is out of apprehension that it would draw on to Iran what it was supposed to deter, namely a preemptive disarming attack. And second, for a nicer reason, the whole Iranian nuclear business began as a defense against Saddam Hussein, who we had just taken out. They wanted these weapons because they were terrified, quite correctly, of Saddam Hussein, who had more than once used weapons of mass destruction on Iranian cities. and people. So we made moot their need, their desire, their demand for these weapons.
Now, the significance of this observation, I have argued it's the equivalent of MI6 telling Stanley Baldwin in 1933 that Hitler would not be invading the Ruhr in 1934, and that we can't draw much more other than we have a little bit of good news. Your assessment of the significance of the NIE?
Look, I don't really think that the United States has had a functioning intelligence service for a great many years now, and I think that's, by the way, a consistent finding and view of everybody in Washington who knows anything about it whatever.
You read Legacy of Ashes yet?
No, I haven't.
Okay, it concurs with that assessment times 100.
But I've talked to a number of people. I mean, we don't have really any intelligence worthy of the name, and this is pretty much useless. I mean, how do they know, one, that how are they expecting us to believe that they know, first, that there was a program and it was a weaponized nuclear program, and second, that it has been stopped rather than paused or put on hold? What do they mean by it stopped? I'd very much like to know. There's no guidance on this at all. Israeli intelligence, which is usually credited with keeping a pretty good ear open in the region, says it's nonsense. As
does Sarkozy, at least 2 weeks ago.
Yes. So it's all very moot. I think myself, and I've always thought, and I've thought in the case of Iran, that the wise assumption to make in these cases is the worst one, that of fanatical totalitarian theocracies, one should not allow the presumption of innocence.
Ahmadinejad today called it a win for Iran, and he announced that Iran will not retreat from enriching uranium. In other words, he poked his fingers in our eyes again.
Yes. I mean, the people I've talked to, I've been in Tehran as well and talked to some of the experts there and elsewhere. I'm not myself an expert, but I'm passed on what little I know. They say Iran's behavior is completely inexplicable if all it wants is a peaceful nuclear enrichment program, which we wanted to have, because we would like them to stop wasting all this oil in the way that they do.
So
it would be an excellent thing if they had we should offer to build. Well, we actually did build the Bushehr reactor for them in another epoch, but they don't behave in any way as if that's all they want. And given the other ways in which they act with deception, with surreptitiousness, with fanaticism, and in search of confrontation, it's just not wise to assume that their intentions are benign. And that's not an intelligence matter. And it's not to be left to our, by the way, very highly politicized as well as very incompetent intelligence services. It's a political call.
Agree with or disagree with this statement that the developments of this week ought not to affect a serious strategy towards Iran at all?
By no means.
Agreed. Okay, number two, do you trust the intelligence agencies to have rendered this verdict without regard to politics? Norman Podhoretz raising the specter that it's yet another part of the war against the war. Others disputing that. I'm of a divided mind here.
Well, I don't know if it's directly another part of the war against the war. We know this much, that the president has been very ill served by a group of leakers and saboteurs in and around the Central Intelligence Agency since the beginning of his presidency. There were people unelected by anybody and whose names are generally not known outside Washington, D.C., who took it upon themselves to intervene to sabotage policies that had been voted for by Congress, as it happens, even if some of those who voted for it now say they didn't or say they wish they hadn't, nonetheless had been, and determined by the president and given to our armed forces to execute, were undermined deliberately, consciously, knowingly by people in the intelligence agencies. I think that is a scandal in and of itself.
Am I going to keep?
Though a good number of people have been fired for it and let go, not enough of them have been fired, and not enough of them have been denounced.
And some have come back who were fired.
And some have come back.
Can I keep you for a second segment, Christpher Hitchens?
By all means.
Because obviously during the break you'll want to read Politico.com, Cheney's interview where he says Iraq to be self-governing by 2009. Do you agree with that assessment?
Sounds, well, first reaction, a bit optimistic.
A bit, just a bit. We'll be right back with Christopher Hitchens, author of God is Not